everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Health Discourse with Sakshi and Sushant. So, hi Sushant, good morning.
Good morning.
So, folks, today we will be talking about some very important things to know about cancer. So, what we will be covering today in this discussion is that how cancer actually develops in our body and why the current healthcare system, despite of having so many medicines and pharmaceuticals at place and a lot of research going on around cancer medicine, why is it that it comes back? There is a lot of we have seen a lot of cases that a lot of patients have lost their lives because of side effects, either the side effects of these medicines or uh, once the cancer it goes away, the tumor goes away, it also turns up back. So Sushant, I think why don't you just shed some light on the whole mechanism of how the whole thing occurs inside the human body?
Okay. So first of all, it's a very worrisome figure. So I was just seeing this morning, and in India, as per 2022 data, right, 2,100 people die of cancer every day, which is 400 more than that in the US, right? In US, 1,700 people die, right? So that's, I think, I think that's the number. But 2,100 people die of cancer every day in India, right? Uh, Before we understand the mechanism, I would like to share a bit about some ancient mechanism also. Why? So probably we'll talk about how why healthcare system goes wrong. But the ancient mechanism is, if you see 2.5 billion years ago, when human beings were also not there, there was not much oxygen in the atmosphere, and the organisms and the organelle, right, used to grow via fermentation, right? And that was the uncontrolled growth, right? Uh, Cancer, a lot of people I've seen, whether India, US, elsewhere, they blame cancer to your genes, but it is not a genetic disease, right? So cancer, in simple words, is the growth of cells out of proportion, or dysregulated cell growth, or dysregulated cell division, right? And we all know that every cell inside our body have mitochondria, right? And mitochondria is is a multicellular organelle. It's an ancient bacteria. It is in very simple humorous way. It is a cousin of these microbes living in a mouth and gut, right? And they control and regulate the cell cycles. We all know mitochondria is the energy powerhouse. They give us ATP, right? And that is what controls the cell cycle, that gives us energy, right? And again, we know the process is oxidative phosphorylation, and oxidative phosphorylation is nothing but, there's an enzyme called cytochrome C that actually oxidize nutrients. So there are enzymes which oxidize nutrients, and which in the turn releasing chemical energy and producing ATP, adenine triphosphate, right? And that is what gives us energy, right? So the simple basic reason is mitochondrial dysfunction, right? And or the damaged oxidative phosphorylation. That is a basic reason for any cancer. And broadly speaking, we'll touch a bit about the oral cancer, what we have launched, but in general, that is the basic reason on how we can have a mitochondrial dysfunction. Is it could be oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, carcinogenic toxins, right? Heavy metals. There are multiple reasons. Even smoking. All those smoking do binds with cytochrome C and stops the flow of electrons. So we know that there is a flow of electrons. So food we consume, there's a flow of electrons through electron transport chain, which again goes to oxygen, and we oxidize these electrons to produce ATP, right? Cytochrome is one that transfers the electron to the oxygen to produce energy, and so smoking and all these things actually bind or suppresses cytochrome C, and that's how we have. So that is one way. When there's a mitochondrial dysfunction, body cannot produce ATP, right? And what happens is, so again, through fermentation pathway, right? Because so most of the thing, we know that the energy we get in the presence of oxygen, right? And when we get energy, we produce chemical energy. There's a byproduct of water, motion, carbon dioxide, it goes at normal process, right? Uh, so in case of mitochondrial dysfunction, probably, your mitochondria cannot produce ATP, and, what happens is, so how does cancer cells grow? These are normal cells. So as I mentioned, it's an distributed growth of cancer cells. How does they grow, right, when there is no ATP, right? So essentially goes to the ancient pathway when there was no oxygen, right? So in a low oxygen environment, right, these even in the absence of oxygen, they ferment basically glucose and glutamine, right? And they that's how they gain energy, and that's how they start growing, right? So again, this is the basic, is how cancer cell grows is if there's a mitochondrial dysfunction. So there's a difference between acute mitochondrial dysfunction, acute oxidative phosphorylation, and chronic. So acute is something, it kills your cell, right? It is not acute, but it is. So in case of acute, there's no tumor growth because the cell gets still dead. But in case of chronic oxidative damage to oxidative phosphorylation or chronic mitochondrial dysfunction, which is again can be caused by multiple factors, as I mentioned, chronic inflammation of cells, or maybe, toxins, carcinotoxins, and maybe certain mutations, certain genetic mutations. That is only 2 to 3% of the cases, right? So essentially, that could lead to make cancer cell, utilize, glucose. There are two sources how they grow, right? Uh, One is glucose, other is glutamine, right? Again, it's an amino acid. So they ferment this, and then that's how they get energy to grow. So for any cell, we need energy to grow, right? And without energy, we cannot survive, right? So essentially, even the same is applicable to tumor cells also, right? So they essentially, in case of mitochondrial dysfunction, there's no energy, so these cancer cells. So do mitochondria controls the cell cycle. So when there's no when there's a mitochondrial dysfunction, it leads to uncontrolled growth, and then they ferment basically two fuels, glucose and glutamine, which helps them grow, right? And again, as a part of the fermentation pathway, there are byproducts of waste products produced, such as lactic acid, succinic acid, pentose, phosphate pathway, and all of this. And these further damages, oxidative phosphorylation, right? So essentially, it's a cascading effect, right? So, and again, this leads to the growth and metastasis of the tumor, right, which spreads everywhere. And when we go for a scanning or physical examination or PET scan or whatever currently investigations what we have right now, right? So essentially, it is this cascading effect of mitochondrial dysfunction, fermentation pathway, and production of these waste products, which is causing acidification in the microenvironment, right? So it is further destroying your oxidative phosphorylation, which is required for producing ATP. So that is what leads to spread of the cell proliferation and growth. So cell proliferate and grows, and metastasis and spreads to different parts of the body, and that's what you see the PET scan, right? Okay, so this is one of the basic aspects. So just before we get into next stage, right? Uh, Basic thing is cancer is not a genetic disease, right? It is not an outcome of mutation. Mutations are a downstream effect of mitochondrial dysfunction, right? And mitochondrial dysfunction can be caused by multiple factors, which could be majorly chronic inflammation of systems, uh, carcinogens, toxins, heavy metals, right? Low antioxidant response, right? Then certain mutations. So essentially, this is the basic of how cancer cells. So any normal cell can become cancerous, right? Provided there is no mitochondria which cannot control its growth, and they actually start fermenting these fuels, right? So even when there is the so again, another important thing is where everyone should know that cytochrome C, which is responsible for transferring electrons to oxygen for producing ATP, right? It is mediated by nitric oxide, right? So essentially, your oral microbiome and your gut microbiome and your oral cell function has a role to play in regulating your mitochondrial functions, right? So there are multiple. So that's why one of the reasons why people living in metro cities and these urban towns, which is very polluted, are having a higher incidence of cancer, right? And again, lung cancer is number one, then it is followed by now oral cancer and breast cancer, right? And these
Colon
are the most.
cancer then again is the colon cancer. We are seeing a lot of incidences around,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I think what I have understood is that this appears to me more of a metabolic disorder, and also a lot of autoimmunity is also there involved in this whole process.
Yeah, so
But
it's a metabolic disease. It's not a genetic disease, it's a metabolic disease, right? It's an outcome of mitochondrial dysfunction. We all know mitochondria is the powerhouse. It regulates the cell cycle, it controls the cell cycle. So that's why it makes sure how much of energy has to go to each cell, right? So our energy has to go to cell, right? So essentially, when there's no mitochondria, the cells become dysfunctional. The cell starts to mitochondria becomes dysfunctional. The cell starts to grow. There's a cell growth and proliferation because they use fermentation pathways, right? Even if the energy is not there because mitochondria is not there, so they use fermentation pathways to actually, so using glucose glutamine again. And these are a few things where they go and proliferate, and as a byproduct they produce lactic succinic acid, and which acidifies the environment, which further causes damage to the oxidative phosphorylation. And this is how this is over. This is not something which happens overnight. This is slowly steady 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then you have this tumor growing, metastasis stage or malign stage or benign stage. Right? So essentially, you have this which you see in your PET scan, and then start forgetting for these toxic drugs which generally happen, right? So that is one aspect. So I think that this is very well clear right now.
yeah, I think that's pretty clear now. I think we can probably move to the next segment, which is about why the healthcare as a system is unable to solve this. Because
Yeah.
we know that what is causing it and how it is being developed in the human body, but it is also important to address that where are the current gap, what are the current gaps which can be overcome.
So what happens is when there's a mitochondrial dysfunction, right? The same mitochondria which was producing ATP start producing reactive oxide species ROS, right? We all know ROS, right? So ROS is again a byproduct when energy is produced, but when there's no energy produced, these start producing ROS because there's a mitochondrial dysfunction. And this damage your lipid, your DNA, your RNA, your proteins, right? So these lead to certain mutations like P53 mutation, which is again a tumor cell protein that impacts your tumor cell. And again, most of the healthcare practitioners, oncologists, and people focus on these mutations, and that's why they are told it is a genetic disorder. Actually, mutation is an outcome of mitochondrial dysfunction and damaged oxidative phosphorylation, right? So essentially, it is not this, they are addressing the downstream effect. They're not addressing the root cause, right? So again, most of these the poisonous drugs which are being propagated, which are being used to kill tumor, right? First is, they do not work in more than 50% of the cases because the impact of these drugs also depends upon your microbiome, right? And again, when you have mitochondrial dysfunction, your mitochondrial imbalance, right? Essentially, these drugs are not going to work in most of the cases, right? And again, there are side effects, multiple side effects. So people have autoimmune issues, people have, neurological issues, and there are multiple mutilations happening inside the body, which directly impacts your physical as your cognitive health, your brain health, right? Your metabolic health for sure, right? So essentially, even if you must have wondered people who go for chemotherapies and radiation and a lot of these things, right? They a lot of people become bald, right? Have you ever wondered why? Because you don't have cancer tumors in your hair, right? It is a side effect because sometimes these, toxins also kill your hair follicle, right? And again, there is a disregulated hair growth, and you have this hair loss and baldness and a lot of these things. So these are side effects, and we've seen people not dying of maybe of cancer, but dying of these side effects, or maybe their longevity is reduced because of these side effects, right? So again, hospitals and most of this, even I was today listening to something, and there was mentioned that government has made a lot of efforts in terms of building these cancer care centers, right, different parts of the country, right? But again, the practice is the same. You are focusing on chemotherapy, drugs, chemotherapy, and radiation, and again, you only detect tumors at a later stage because there's a lot of cascading effect of mitochondrial dysfunction is happening for years before it shapes up into a metastasis stage or even a malign stage. So essentially, that is something which is a biggest gap, right? So this is one thing, and the biggest thing what I've learned is nobody focuses on nutrition in hospitals, right? So nobody is focusing on uh, how to reduce the blood sugar response, right? Because glucose is one of the things which feeds your cancer cells, which feeds your tumors, right? How to prevent glutamine. Again, glutamine is very tricky because most of the foods have glutamine, right? So how do you make sure there are preventative strategies around it, right? There is something called intermittent fasting, which is actually recommended for people who have cancer, right? And again, none of these I'm not sure. I've not seen any of these uh, hospitals focusing on nutrition, right? And a lot of people think nutrition is only protein, carbs, and fats. There's first of all, nobody has a clear understanding of nutrition science. Right? That is so. So there are three biggest reasons why they have failed. Was first thing is the cancer is detected at a late stage, right? Uh, they do not have any other solutions apart from going for chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and they target the downstream effect like genetic mutations or the protein damage or the DNA damage, right? Uh, which is an outcome of mitochondrial dysfunction, which is an outcome of ROS produced by the mitochondria, right? So, and again, nutrition is never focused. Right? These are a very, very important aspect of, which is not being covered, right? And again, coming on to nutrition. So again, I've generally told basic things, right? That high glucose, ultra processed foods, right, have an impact on your cancer treatment because they feed the tumor cells. Glutamine has an impact on cancer because it feeds the tumor cells. So basically, they ferment and then they further release, as I mentioned, they further release the byproducts, succinic acid, lactic acid, which further impacts, damages oxidative phosphorylation, right? So essentially, um, the, so third thing is nutrition is really, really important. You just can't say, okay, just go for chemotherapy and it's done. So that is something very, very important to understand, right? And so this is something which is really, really important from uh, cancer prevention point of view. Nobody is actually focusing on prevention. Nobody is focusing on what causes mitochondrial dysfunction, chronic inflammation, what specific pathways, what specific metabolites, oral microbiome, gut microbiome, what inflammatory markers being overexpressed, what is causing oxidative stress, what is causing disruption of nitric oxide production, right? So there are multiple things which has to be looked into it, right? Which has not been, so we generally, any cancer, you take any cancer, these are detected and treated at a later stage and the survival rate vanishes, right? So the 5-year survival rate is very, very low, less than 50% in most of the cases.
As we come to the end of this discussion, Sushant, I think maybe a lot of people would be really interested to know that in order to prevent cancer, what should be the ideal steps? Though we have already, discussed these things time again in our talks, but just for the sake of their knowledge and let's put it together, that what are the things that they should be preventing in order to, prevent the onset of cancer? Because a lot of people these days by the time they turn 40 they are more concerned about the things that whether they should not be infected with such a thing,
Yeah,
right?
because
Because
I
it
remember
is.
we were talking to one of our customers who was
Yes,
more
yes,
concerned कि
they
मुझे
have
cancer तो नहीं है.
they have these concerns because although they have been trying to prevent, do a
Hmm.
lot of prevention, but
Hmm.
then maybe it is just you know uh, the ongoing numbers they are scary, right? So
Hmm.
let us just educate people about what should be the ideal steps for the prevention of cancer. That includes starting from their lifestyle, from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed. I think you can just sum it up in that way.
So that will be very, very personal for everyone. So I'll give you certain pointers here, right? First thing is that we do not have currently, the current healthcare system do not have any sort of investigation that can measure your mitochondrial dysfunction or measure, except from C-reactive protein, which is again, which is one of the cause. It tells you inflammation level, but doesn't tell you the source of inflammation, right? So the first thing is obviously your, the starting point is obviously, you know, avoid ultra processed foods, avoid taking sugar, avoid taking too much of protein, right? Higher protein. I'm not saying do not take protein. Protein is an essential part of the diet, but replacing any other, foods with protein
Artificial or
is a bad
synthetic
choice.
protein.
Yeah. So any protein, even in foods, if you consume more than your body can does, it goes to your gut microbes, releases inflammatory molecule which causes inflammation, right? So again, that is one of the aspects should be considered, right? Then do not buy anything which is made in factory, right? So even anything you're buying in, in supermarkets, right, which may claim, oh, we do not have sugar or we have, high fiber and a lot of these things probably, oh, you should consume only what is being produced in farm. So have a lot of fruits, vegetables, right? Have a lot of dietary fiber, have a lot of nuts and seeds, fat is an essential part of diet. So you should have good amount of saturated fat. You should have good amount of, monounsaturated fats, right? Fatty acids, right? Which again, short chain fatty acids, something produced by a gut microbe when you consume a lot of dietary fiber, right? Polyphenols, antioxidants, flavonoids, right? So these are three few things. Stress should be managed, right? So probably meditation should be done, right? Exercise 3 to 5 days a week at least. You know,
I
uh,
think also,
at,
Sushant, what I've seen that overdoing of exercise also causes oxidative stress in a few people.
yeah, yeah.
If you
Oh,
overdo it for like,
so only thing is do maybe 60 minutes a day, 45 to 60 minutes a day, which could involve weight training and a bit of brisk walk, right? At least 3 to 5 days a week, right? So that much you should give, at least 5 hours a week you should give to your body, right? So these are few things, but again, coming on to again, these are just sort of based on journal recommendations, right? But this may work for someone, may not work for people, especially when you're taking nutrition. There are certain foods which may cause inflammatory cascades, which we may not know because we do not have such information. Because most of the nutrition advice are around carb, fat, protein, fat. They're not about how each of these molecules are metabolized and synthesized at the body, right? So that is again, so this is one thing what we have started at our end now. So we started with oral cancer early detection test. So we look at all the inflammatory markers. We look at cancer specific cell energy metabolism. We look at oxidative cell levels. We look at antioxidant response, right? We look at carcinogenic toxins, right? So there's a lot of factors we are looking at to probably tell you where you're going wrong, and why all these are contributing to which particular pathway and how much of it is contributing towards the mitochondrial dysfunction, right? And then production of ROS, right? And again, we can identify those signals, pre-tumor signals, like, for instance, oral cancer, we could look at, the volatile sulfur compounds, like, for instance, these are generally produced by you consuming tofu or you consuming, cruciferous vegetables such as a cabbage, right, or broccoli, right? Those could produce hydrogen sulfide or methylamine captain, which could have an, tumor progression indication, right? Or maybe we look at different inflammatory processes, including uric acid, LPS, TMA, a number of these things. And then we also look at, the cancer specific cell metabolism. So lactic acid, succinic acid, pentose, phosphate pathway, their number. So these are specific to oral cancer. So we look at these disease signal, and then on that basis, we also carve out our machine learning model, carved out a nutrition program for your biology, which suppresses these inflammatory factors and promotes the antioxidant response. You know, improves your mitochondrial function. Improve your activation of PGC1 alpha, improve your mitochondrial biogenesis, right? So the multiple things what we look at, right? So essentially, these are, so you need to fix your biology. Your biology is very, very unique, and there's a lot of population of microbiome living inside your body, and again, those microbes, whether in mouth or gut or vagina or skin or everywhere, right? They have performed tens of thousands of biochemical functions. Right? So essentially, measuring all those biochemical functions is also one of the important things which we are doing right now. Right? So, so, so it is cancer is actually preventable, right? Provided you understand your biology, you fix your biology at a molecular level, and again, this is something very, very important because you can't just, if you go to oncology, probably for instance, if you go to, a dentist and you ask whether I have a lesion in my mouth or not because I'm a smoker, right? Or I drink alcohol quite often, right? So probably, or probably I'm taking a lot of artificial sweetener, right? So essentially, uh, if it's not visible, it doesn't mean it's not being formed or there's nothing bad going on inside the body. So probably, the the point is that they are not looking at it, right? Because those are asymptomatic signals right now, right? Because they usually only come up at a later stage, right? So essentially, again, since it's a metabolic disease, right? What we are recommending for oral cancer tests is people who have hypertension, people who have obesity, people who have type 2 diabetes, who have liver cirrhosis, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, risk of chronic kidney disease, right? Digestive troubles, right? They should go for our oral cancer test, which would tell you a early indication of which will tell you whether you do not have, or you're progressing towards one, right? So it's all three things what we tell, right? So so that is really important. And Sakshi, would you like to share about something what we are introducing for, which is a consumer friendly for our patients in terms of the pricing, right?
Yeah, so I think from September onwards, what we will be offering is that people who think that the price, a product price is high for them, they can pay, make payments for the same in terms of EMI. So it could be a
In
12
terms of,
month,
so don't call it EMI because it's a monthly subscription, right?
it's a
So
monthly subscription,
it's a
yes.
12 months program because the program involves measuring your biology, measuring your biochemistry, right? Uh, Telling you your current state, giving you recommendation, and again collecting or using your longitudinal data, which is self-reported longitudinal data, which we collect and retrain the system to change your recommendations. Again, is something which we are tracking on a monthly basis for you for your biology using our system, right? So it is a very foolproof system. It is all data driven, right? So based on your molecular data, your longitudinal data, your clinical data, we are measuring and we are making appropriate changes in your nutrition, which keeps your body back, bring your body back into balance state. And again, it's a 12-month subscription, annual subscription, which you
And
pay.
that's an interest free, one can actually make the payments in interest free
Yeah, so
EMIs.
so so
Yes. So,
essentially, it's something which is a sort of monthly subscription, right? So
yes.
so what Sakshi means by interest free is probably, we are arranging a facility where we do not pay any even a single penny towards interest or percentage. It is all borne by us, right? And again, you pay a month. For you it's a monthly subscription sort of model, right? So that is again. For people who think that I should not pay at one go or probably I should pay monthly, and people who are paying at one go, we do incentivize them with offering another maybe 3,000-4,000 rupees extra discount, right? So again, this is all for the benefit of people who are not healthy, who are sick, who have a risk of number of diseases, and in order to make sure that we are serving them very well, and at that time we do meet our cost and we do make a bit of money which could be really brought back into the business, and we could further get into more research and development activities, right?
So thank you, Sushant. This was a very interesting discussion. And thank you to all our listeners for being with us and for showing your love. You can probably share all our talks and podcasts with your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.